Hello guys, even though I've done a lot of content regarding simple plug and play HDMI adapters for your retro gaming consoles, now let's get into some budget analog to HDMI scalers. As my goal here in this video is to use the original hardware and not compromise by using emulation or getting an expensive CRT TV, so I can get my beloved retro console set up to my main HD TV without breaking the bank. Now these do require some additional cabling and some setting up that might not be for everyone, but I'm sure you may have heard of the RetroTink, which is a huge recommendation, but do look at this price. Yeah, that's pretty heavy, as well with the famous FrameMeister, going for a pretty penny. So can we get a decent 4K upscaled clean signal with one of these without breaking the bank and being a more of a simple setup? So very excited to get into this video, in which I'll be concentrating on the optimum results from one of these adapters from the PlayStation 2. Then at the end I'll compare the one with the best results with the fat original 60GB PS2 backwards compatible PS3 model. So hit that like and subscribe button, which is much appreciated for this channel to grow. We're almost at 10K here. So first up is the Retroscaler 2X, priced around £40. I even seen this go up to even 70 quid. And what I do like about this design is its enclosed shell, and it's very nice size, and it seems very simple and friendly to use. We got our input select button and the smoothing mode button, our RGB component cable input with our S video next to it, and we have our RCA composite with our audio jack left and right channel connected on the right hand side, and a physical on and off switch, much like the back of the fat PS2. It does have a rattly kind of cheap plastic build to this, but it does do the job. Well, we got this hooked up with the original composite cables, and is stated that it does accept a 240 interlace and a 480 interlace, as well as the PAL 476 with zero lag and a filter mode to enhance 2D based handling. But let's test this out with the original composite on the PS2, and look, we do have a lovely looking purple screen. But now let's go with the PlayStation 2 with component cables hooked up to this, and yay, we get a picture. But wow, having a look here, we do have some serious noise interface. Not a fan of this at all. And with no extra additions as like screen stretching or just basic adjustments with this adapter, proven to cause much problem with compatibility issues, and also not being compatible with my Elgato capture card, I'm just not a fan. Up next is the Retroscaler GBSC Pro. Now you may have seen some of the earlier models floating about like the GBSC, in which I personally have stayed away from due to the bad reviews. But this is their later revision, which has corrected some of their problems that has happened in the previous models, with this model of release being a 1.3 board revision, correcting its overloaded protected circuit and updated its Type-C interface, which has had a good amount of praise with this release, so it makes a great addition to this video. The converter is one of the bigger fellas though, but I do like its simple design and its accessible layout. We got ourselves a dial switcher here to interact with the onboard menu, a simple instructed output and input connectivity for the HDMI, and a separate audio 3.5mm out. We got that lovely RGB SCART input, and we have the RGB component with a VGA next to that. What will be mostly concentrating in this video is the component for the PlayStation 2. And on the other side we got the S video input and two Type-Cs and a functional update switch. But not to worry about all that stuff. Let's just concentrate on the component input. Now when using this cheap component cable from Amazon, the scaler does not like it one bit, which is pretty fair due to the quality built. But when I use this well built cable, for example, which you can find a purchase link below, this one works a lot more the way it should do. Now the scaler being compatible with my Elgato card, we can now have a closer look. So we have those native bordering around the rendered image, but this scaler lets you access some great tweaks. So personally, I just like to move the rendered image to be more centralized and more stretched to fill the top and bottom and have that slightly stretched 4:3 ratio, just a personal preference of mine. We got the ADC gain on to get the boost of the dark levels and keep that line filter mode on, and lastly the sharpness tool turned on. So I leave everything else the same, but we can get our stock default screen looking from this. And now over to my personal preference tweaked mode looking like this. So now let's go a little further. Remember this little fella, the M Classic. Now this will take that upscaled image even further from 720p, for an example, up to 1440p. Some people are not a big fan of this adapter, but I did find this worked really well with the GBSC Pro. And then I add and chain up with the photo fast, this will bump up that 1440p signal to a 4K, which is really handy as some TVs out there wouldn't even accept the 1440p, which makes you stuck with the 1080p compatibility, even if your TV does support 4K. But this can push the price up a bit. If you include, for example, the GBSC Pro, which costs around about £75, and then the Amp Classic, which is currently around about 70, and then PhotoFast Custom around about £80 at the moment. This will fetch you around 225 quid altogether, but you may be alright with just using the Amp Classic on top of this, making it around 150 quid. So how does this look altogether? Well, bam. Again, here is how it looked like with just the scaler set to its native default settings, and now with the M Classic and PhotoFast, and with the settings tweaked to just my personal preference. Again, you will find below in the description a video dedicated to setting up your GBSC Pro. And sticking around with this video, I'll show you some extra beneficial TV settings to make the picture quality even better. And next up is the GBSC Pro Mini. Yes, it does exactly what it says on the tin. Well, only British people will get that reference. It does come with a heavier price tag, over £40 more, but I do love the size of this. The build quality is a generic plastic, but I do have some problems with this, in which I'll explain very shortly. This time around we have the component inputs on the front and the SCART power indicated as well next to it. Yes, we do need to have this turned on to receive the SCART signal. We got this Type-C input for updates and the power input. We got our separate aux in and our HDMI out, and the power switch is on the other side. And we also got our downscale out, a feature that people are really enjoying with this, but personally I probably never get any use out of this. And we get more of these micro switches again. The HDMI needs to be turned on, and we got the downscale feature on and off, and the sync SOG and RGB. Personally, I won't be using these switches much, but I will have to have that RGB to YBBR set to turn on to the YPBBR for that component feature to work. These micro switches are very small and fiddly. Then turning it on the side, we do have our VGA in and our SCART input as well. So essentially everything that you need, and the same as a GBSC Pro. Now let's compare this now with the original, and you can definitely see the size difference. This layout with the component cable input at the front is quite baffling and very fiddly, especially when you have to connect the power cable as well, with the built-in screen facing the other way. Not a great layout. Comparing this with the bigger GBSC Pro, the original, the main connectors are all facing at the back, so a clearer setup. Now my personal main gripe with this adapter is that built-in fan noise. For me, this is just a bit too loud. A lot louder than the fans built in the console. The image results though are exactly the same as what you would get with the original GBS Pro, so this is pretty awesome. Of course, connect that M's Classic and that PhotoFast to pull off even greater looking visuals. It's looking like the firmware feature is the same as the GBSC Pro, but I only found some extras like the YPBR mode, color correction feature is added, and the input selection mode, which is pretty handy. But that fan noise, yeah, not for me. Next up is the OSSC, and this does really have a decent name for itself, in which does come with a slightly higher price. I really do love the design and the size of this adapter, and having a complete black shell design, and with the screen actually on the front of this, making it the best design and layout so far. We got one jack audio in and one jack audio out, so to get our audio from say our component cables, we have to buy an adapter separately, a SCART audio to a 3.5. The OSSC has been my main go-to when hooking up my PlayStation 2 to my big screen. Once I got my head around how to operate this thing, in which it did originally come across very daunting, especially if you're new to picking some of these adapters up. Just have a look now at the difference between the OSSC remote and the GBSC. This is where the GBSC Pro wins by just being user friendly, even more so with this simple interface. But the OSSC does provide a lot more options to tweak to your heart content. The nature of the OSSC works as a line doubler, up to ×3 when you use a PlayStation 2 480p signal, for example, With the GBSC, simply just using an upscaling technique to a 720p, 960 or even a 1080p. The OSSC is capable of providing a line level resolution that is slightly higher than that, so the nature of the output resolution can be quite obscure for certain TVs to even recognize. And even my capture card, for example, this will not be able to pick this up, so I am unable to capture some footage for you unless I set it to a direct signal of 480p out. Of course, there's a lot of features you can have in the options to get a better signal with this adapter. To get a captured footage and add in M Classic, for an example, it does not function correctly at all. But when you do have it to default 480p clear pass-through, we still carry those borders that is the nature of the PlayStation 2 video output. Again, as shown, any form of tweaks, the capture card will not recognize the signal. And you can see now with the M Classic added on, the darkness levels are far too low, even though if you try to get the balancing of the brightness up as well. But I can assure you, when you do have your settings tweaked to the highest levels, it does have a really good output, which I can show you it is better than the GBSC on standard with no M Classic photo fast. So you're probably thinking now, why not skip all this drama and simply use a plug and play LevelHike HDMI adapter, in which I've been raving and praising about a lot in the past, just to get your PlayStation 2 up and running on your new HD TV. Now I find that this does work all great, especially with the PS1. The LevelHike is only capable of connecting with a 480 interlace RGB signal. So even though the picture can be fine for a lot of people out there using RGB only with 480i that has a built-in upscaled image of 720p, you will find titles that are not centralized with a 4:3 ratio that is fitted correctly. May not bother a lot of people, but it does annoy me. And we do get those native PlayStation 2 video output bordering, in which I'm just not the biggest fan of borders. I just like this image to fill the entire screen at the right correct ratio. It's also compatible with the M Classic attached, but because it is working with that 480i interlace signal, as good enough job as if it was working with a progressive signal. So here is what it's like with the LevelHike adapter hooked up with the M Classic compared to the GBSC Pro M Classic, with the game set to 480 progressive using soft modding. So let's take another step further now, as viewers in the past have expressed themselves saying why not just use a PlayStation 3 60GB model that is compatible with PlayStation 2 games, so you can just get a HDMI signal onto your new TV that way. Well, firstly, this console is amazing, far too ambitious as a console at the time, but it is awesome. But they were getting pretty pricey these days. Also, the life expectancy is not getting any better, especially these times, or even trying to refurbish them can cause problems. Well, I thought to keep it to its authentic roots by using this PlayStation 2 to PS3 adapter, and I've had this now for a couple of years and I finally got an excuse to use this. But it has been a long time since I've powered on this console, so I'm quite on edge to find out if this still is working. Oh yay, we got that beep. Love me some XMB. Now for another test, will this still read my PlayStation 2 game? And we're in luck, happy days. Well, there are two ways to go about this, so let's see which one works best. So first, let's default the highest resolution for the PlayStation 3 to 1080p, only by heading to the video output setting and HDMI, head to custom, and then tick in that 720p and leave the 1080p tick. So the console will now upscale 576p to 1080p. Well, we got those borders going on again, and that width is accurate with 4:3, but the height is not, so it's distorting the image, and the built-in upscaler from the PlayStation 3 is not looking so good. So let's try the other method this time, setting the console to 576p, which if you have an NTSC console would say 480p. So there's no upscaling from the PS3, but we'll plug in the M Classic and the PhotoFast this time to do the heavy lifting of the upscaling. With the side-by-side footage now with the 576p with the M Classic and PhotoFast on the right, you see that the image balance and the sharpness is better. Well, everyone does have their own personal preference when hooking up their beloved retro console to a modern HD TV, but which one do I personally prefer, and which came on top of all these adapters that I've shown you? Well, that will be the GBSC Pro with the added extra upscalers, as in the M Classic and the PhotoFast. But remember, the OSSC will give you better results than the GBSC Pro if you don't add the additional upscalers. After that then would be the GBSC Pro Mini. That fan noise and layer did really let it down for me. After that would be the LevelHike HDMI adapter. It is the most simple plug and play method that could be fine for everyone, but will not give you the optimum results when it comes to an affordable method of getting HDMI out of your PlayStation 2. I have done a dedicated video on comparing a lot of these cheaper adapters, and basically the LevelHike came on top. In that video, a lot of viewers mentioned that they've been really enjoying the Rad2X adapter, but it does come with a hefty price. That doesn't even include a USB micro, you have to pay extra for that. And you'll be only able to utilize this adapter for just the PS1 and the PS2, and of course the input delivery cost on top of all that. So I personally have not been too excited about that one. This Retroscaler X2, that can just go in for recycling. As mentioned earlier, there are some visual tweaks that can be provided by your own TV. I'm using this 4K Sony TV, a good mid-range model, nothing too fancy, but as you can see, thanks to the PhotoFast, that 4K signal is being registered. And when the video output is matching your TV panel resolution, it will provide a sharper, smoother video image as the communication from the input to the TV holds less processing and deals a direct fitted canvas. Of course, set your HDMI input to game mode. This will help towards any input delay. This is a must for gamers, which I'm sure a lot of you probably already know. Now, I also do recommend tweaking your color and your brightness and even your black levels. This will be different for other TVs, because if you find some of these levels are too high, it would cause distortion for the image. With this TV, I'm sure that you can find something similar to your own TV, and that is you can provide better clarity. So I just pump up the sharpness and the clarity upscaling, but not too much as it can cause distortion. Each TV has its own characteristics, so you just have to spend time in finding what works best for yourself. Links can be found below, of course, for both the GBSC Pro, the M Classic and the LevelHike HDMI adapter. I appreciate everyone sticking on this video to give you a better understanding of the nature of the PlayStation 2 video output. So thanks for watching, and as always, if you like this video, hit that button. If you want to support the channel, click subscribe, leave your comments below, and I'll catch you lot on my next video.